hello there. I'm Lexi, and this is the Prodigal's Purpose podcast. Today, we are going to talk about one of my besties. I've actually never met him while he's alive, but our friendship runs deeper than even death can't part us. I'm going to talk about a beautiful and amazing saint named Padre Pio. Now, the reason I'm doing this is number one, I want to explore saints a little bit more, and number two, I was inspired by my students. I did a little fun lesson about Padre Pio and how dopity-ropity he is, and they fangirled and freaked out so much. I'm like, I'm sure other humans might want to learn more about this guy. Like, let's do it. So first off, Padre Pio is a Catholic saint, okay? So in the Catholic Church, we basically have like a Hall of Famers, okay? Where when somebody has lived a good life, followed God, and is just like such an awesome holy example, and after they pass, miracles or mysteries or things have occurred that show like a divine intervention. There's a very specific process, but eventually they become a canonized saint. So that means there is undisputable, undeniable proof that they are with God in heaven. So there's a lot of saints we might not know, but there are some saints that we actually do know, and one saint is Padre Pio, okay? Now, just so you understand what the vibe of this episode is going to be, I am going to flex and brag about him. But then I also want to talk, the second part, I just want to talk about like my specific friendship with him, because he and I do have a personal relationship, even though he's a cute little old monk that lived many years before me in Italy. And I just want to share that experience and also just kind of shine some light on how saints can be our friends even today. Okay? So I took notes. I did my research. So I want to make sure I have things factual and correct. Padre Pio's feast day is September 23rd. Go Padre Pio. A feast day is the day that a saint died. We celebrate that almost like a birthday because that is the day that they got to get to heaven and see Jesus. Okay, so September 23rd is his feast day. He was born May 25th, 1887. He was a child of 8. I think he was like the second or third. He was one of the older ones, and his name was Francesco. And at the age of 15, he felt called to join the Capuchin Franciscan order. I don't know if you've met a lot of 15-year-old boys, but that ain't normal. Maybe it was a little bit more normal back then. I mean, 1887, that's like a history textbook year. But either way, he felt called to religious order to give his life fully to God, and so he does that. Now, this is when things start to get cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. I want to discuss like all the amazing mysteries and miracles about his life, because a lot of times with saints, you don't get to see the miracles until after their death. But with him, he lived through these miracles in a day-to-day way while he was still alive. And I think that's like the fascination behind Padre Pio, because I remember just growing up in the Catholic world, like I see pictures of the short little bearded monk everywhere, and I'm like, gosh, these guys like really love this dude. And he had these gloves with no fingers on them. Not like he didn't have fingers, but like cut off. And I'm like, why is he like pulling like an 80s moment, like giving Madonna glove, Michael Jackson? Like, I don't understand this guy. And so here's why everybody was fascinated with him. At the age of 31, he's a cute little monk in Italy, and he's in the choir loft praying, and he's praying before a crucifix. And he has this spiritual like encounter and vision of Jesus Christ on the cross, and he is invited into receiving the wounds of Christ. When we say the wounds of Christ, we mean the wounds associated with his crucifixion. So everybody always sees like the hands with nails, feet with nails, side was pierced, so pierced side. Some cases, they even have like bleeding around the head for like the crown of thorns and stuff. But he was invited into experiencing the wounds of Christ in an invisible way, and then eventually became a physical way. And so we call this experience the stigmata, okay? So the wounds of Christ. So at the age of 31, these wounds started to appear on his hands and on his feet and on his side. And there was no explanation about it. And sometimes saints that have had this experience of the stigmata, like it would happen on Fridays, it would happen once a year, it would happen on holy feast days. Padre Pio had this chronically, this encounter for 50 years, okay? And here's some really cool things about this miracle. His wounds continuously bled. All right. So like, you know, like when you scrape your knee and it's like gushing and it's super gross and ketchup, and then you like put a Band-Aid and patch it up. Or like, honestly, you start seeing your body, which is a miracle in of itself. You start seeing your body like naturally heal and you got scabs and whatever. There was no scabbing and there was just profuse bleeding from it. There was also no odor. Okay. So like, you know, that like irony smell of blood. There was no odor. Some people even said it smelled like roses. Okay. So crazy. So weird. The amount of blood he lost, he should be anemic. He should have medical issues. He should have infections. No infection. It was always a clean wound, profusely bleeding. And after a medical examination, it was estimated he lost like about a cup and a half of blood every day. So you would not be living life and like being okay with this. And he had no ulcers, no issues, just this profuse bleeding that constantly kept happening. So it was just insanity. And so he also was trying to cover those wounds and things, and so that's why he wore the gloves. But during the Mass, when a priest says a Mass, you can't have anything on your hands. And so when he would perform Mass, you would see the wounds bleeding all the time. And so that's kind of one of the big fames that like came about him, or people started questioning, like, who is this guy? San Giovanni Rotunda, like, what is happening, right? So that visible miracle was what brought a lot of people in. He also had a very, very deep spiritual life. He had a lot of visions. So like I just said, like Jesus appeared to him and gave him the stigmata. He had visions of Mary. He would talk to his guardian angels all the time. And he even would send them on errands for him. He's like, can you tell this person I'm praying for them? Can you tell this person I'm going to be late? And the other people had these like spiritual encounters on his guardian angel's behalf. So like imagine you had a guardian angel on standby that would just like DoorDash for you. Just really cool stuff. He even would have these visions of purgatory, which is a Catholic belief, and there's scripture backing behind it, but I don't want to get in the whole doctrine of it. But it is the place in which a soul needs to be purified and you know, pray and have prayers said for them before they are truly ready to enter the kingdom of heaven. And so he kept having these visions of these souls stuck in purgatory, asking him for prayers or asking him to say masses, and he would help souls in that way get to heaven. So this guy was just wild. I mean, it was so cool. And his spiritual life was just so strong. But again, he's just this short, cute little monk. So aside from like that happening on a regular basis, his sweet spot and his secret weapon was confession. Okay, the sacrament of confession was his charism. He was so good at it, and people felt profoundly different by his spiritual direction and his prayer and his facilitating in the sacrament of confession. There would be lines and waiting where people would travel to go to his confessions, and they would have to schedule like weeks out, like 3 or 4 weeks out. And it is said that he was in the confessional for up to 16 hours a day. And one thing that was super cool is there was a special ability he had known as reading souls. And one story is that there was this young man, he went in the confessional and he's like, okay, I did this, I did that. And he was holding back a lot and he knew that, but he just was like in his routine and, you know, whatever. So when he was done, he rattled it off, whatever. He just kind of sat there and Padre Pio waited and he said, is that all of it? He's like, yeah, it's everything. He's like, are you sure? He's like, yeah, I have nothing else to say. He goes, I think you forgot something. And then he just starts reading his soul. He goes, what about that girl you led into sexual sin? What about that abortion that you helped pay for? What about when you stole money from your boss in Naples? And he just goes off and reads his whole soul. Now, if that happened to me, I would easily pee my pants in the confessional. However, I also want to emphasize that Padre Pio reading souls isn't a shame fest. He sees what is weighing down on these people and what they're holding back from God. Really, it's not Padre Pio, it's God. What they're holding back from God and what they're not ready to give to him. And so sometimes when we have a wound, it's terrible. But when you go to the doctor and it's infected or something's wrong with it, they might need to go deeper, right? They might need to open that wound up and see what the real cause or root of the problem is. Maybe they need surgery, right? And so Padre Pio was kind of like that surgeon, opening up that wound and allowing them to really be vulnerable and show everything to Jesus so that the divine physician can come in and heal them in remarkable ways. And so he read his soul, and that, you know, inspired and broke down the young man where he finally had a true and authentic confession. And then he later said, he's like, I am profoundly different. I feel lighter. I feel free. I feel healed. Like, God bless God bless Padre Pio. He said, I met Jesus through Padre Pio. And he just had this gift of spiritual direction. So like advising and consoling people. He was the ultimate pen pal, okay? He is said to have had like hundreds of people all over the world that would write to him and ask him for spiritual help. And he was said to be seen carrying around letters all the time and writing letters any free moment he had. So he's the ultimate pen pal, which is just super cute. One of the most radical or crazy things is his ability to bilocate. So bilocation means that you can be at two places at once. Wouldn't we love that? I could be home deep cleaning while I'm in bed taking a nap, or at school working, or I don't know, like, or I could be at the gym while I'm eating ice cream. I mean, I would bilocate for all the wrong reasons, but he did everything for the right reasons. So there would be times where people are like, oh yeah, I saw Padre Pio at the market. And then somebody's like, no, he's been hearing confession all day. They're like, no, I definitely saw Padre Pio at the market. And they're like, no, he's at confession all day. And it happened in the monastery all the time too. The friars would experience this as well. But one of the coolest bilocation stories yet is there were American pilots in World War II that had an order to fly over San Giovanni Rotondo, which is where Padre Pio's monastery is, because they believed that there was a secret Nazi base there. And they were ordered that they needed to bomb San Giovanni Rotondo. Okay? So these pilots are flying out, and they are about to get to the spot where they're supposed to drop the bombs. And all of a sudden, outside their plane, like, I just can't even imagine this. Outside their plane, they see this flying monk. Okay, just freestyling, just la 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 la, just flying. And he flies in front of the plane, and he goes like this. He like puts his hand out, and he like is signaling to like stop. And then the pilot, it's time to drop the bombs, and he is clicking the buttons and trying, and the plane malfunctions, and he's not able to complete his mission. And so then the monk signals for them to like go back or like to turn around, and they leave and they failed their mission. And so multiple pilots had this experience. They're like, the weirdest thing. And they're like, oh, me too. And so they talk, and eventually one of them finds or sees a picture of Padre Pio, and they're like, that's him. I recognize him. And they show his friends, and they're like, yeah, that's the one I saw. And so they actually make a trip out to San Giovanni Rotondo and meet Padre Pio. And they tell this story to him of like, I know it was you. Like, I swear it's you, or you look just like him. And they explain the situation, and sweet Padre Pio just sits there and is smiling. And then finally, he just smiles and he looks at them, and they're like, was it you? Like, was it you? And he says, you're not allowed to destroy God's home. And just smiles. Just like goosebumps. Like, I love him because he always did such a good job of humility and reflecting these miracles and these things back onto God, and use them through him to glorify God. And yeah, just tons of crazy things happened. Another one was there's a lot of healings that would happen when he would give blessings or pray for people. One little girl was born blind. And so she was born without her pupils. So the dark part of our eye, the little dark spot, that does all the work, okay? That does the magic. She was born without a dark spot, without a pupil. And so her eye was just like all green or all blue. She's never seen anything before. No sight, born this way. She comes to Padre Pio and is blessed. And then she is able to see because they were praying for healing. She was able to see. And they go to the doctor, and her eyes grew pupils that have never been there before. And there was no medical explanation for it. And so she attests, this miracle to Padre Pio. So a lot of things are happening, okay? People are hearing about him. They're being healed by him. People are flocking to the sacraments for him, confession. People want to go to mass because that's where he's able to see the stigmata. He was told, wear your gloves to like avoid the publicity of it. But like, obviously when these natural phenomena are happening, like these like unnatural ones, there's like hysteria, and there's also a lot of doubt and speculation. And I will say that in the spirit of miracles, we should be desiring to see where God is trying to speak to us and show us things, but it also is healthy to question it. Not in God can't even do this, but just for the legitimacy of it, to truly declare it to be a miracle or not. Now, as Padre Pio was doing God's work and all these things were happening, he obviously created a lot of fans, but he also created a lot of haters. There were some friars, some monks, some people that were very big skeptics of this Padre Pio, thought it was fake, thought he was doing this for clout, all these lies. And so the Vatican told him that he was restricted. The Holy Office ordered him to no longer do spiritual direction, to no longer say Mass publicly, no longer allowed to hear confessions. And if that was me, I would have thrown a freaking fit. I would have been pissed. God's calling me to this. Why am I being treated like this? I'm treated like a martyr. Like, this isn't fair. But Padre Pio just responded with the utmost obedience. And for years, he was not allowed to do these things. And I especially would feel like that would be such a hard sacrifice, especially if you feel called to it. And there's been times in my life, too, where I feel called to serve God in these ways, but these doors are shut to me and I don't understand why. And I look up to Padre Pio and I hope and wish I can carry my cross or carry my struggle, even if I do want to serve God, with the obedience that he did. He never protested. He never spoke poorly of the church. Said, I feel like a priest without an altar, a shepherd without his sheep, but may God's will be done. And I just am so inspired by that of, he felt called by God to serve. And even when service is taken from him, God's will be done. And so from 1924 to 1933, Padre was kind of put in hiding as they were doing these investigations and things. And even though this was a time of struggle and hardship for him, I think this is where his devotion and his spirituality and his prayer life just deepened even more, which you can't even fathom. But also, the church was able to do proper investigation. They had medical examiners and doctors look at it, and they were able to verify and validate that these things are true. So what's even cooler about this is, there is that concern of like, is it true? Is it real? Why is God allowing this to happen? But then because we follow these orders that we might not know and these restrictions we might not understand, we follow a due process. And from that, we get the gift of truth. And so now, with that medical examination, like, to all the haters and speculators, like, proof's in the pudding, bro. Check the medical docs. This is really happening. It's just so crazy and so cool. Another thing that was nuts about Padre Pio is he was attacked by demons all the time. They really hated his gift in the confessional because the good confession is where souls are saved. And Padre Pio's, that was his charism. And so the devil did not like how many souls Padre was leading back to Christ. And so the monks say that there would be many times where they would hear shouting, and it sounded like fistfights in his room. Furniture would be thrown. He would have bruises and marks all over him. He never brought it up. He never complained. He talked to his spiritual director about it, but like, it wasn't like he's like, OMG guys, guess what happened last Tuesday, and like gossiped or anything. I mean, he was very humble about it, but he was literally physically and spiritually attacked by demons all the time. And I'm not saying I've gotten in a fist fight with Satan or the devil. I would be freaking out. But I will say that I do think it just kind of points to us of like, when we are truly following God's work and we truly are leading other people to Christ, that's when Satan is going to put a target on you and really attack you and really push you. Now, his was a whole different level of attacking and pushing. Like, I don't even want to fathom that. But it just goes to show you, if you do feel beaten down or targeted by Satan or by temptation, it's probably because you have gifts or you have a plan with God in mind that can do wonders and really help people. And so to not get discouraged or give up on that, because God can use that. But Satan sees it and sees it as a big threat. So you're going to have some haters. Last big thing is the rosary. Padre Pio loved his rosary. It said that if he wasn't carrying letters, he was carrying his rosary wherever he went. And he says, the rosary is the weapon of this time. Prayer is the weapon of this time. Interceding on Mary to help us is the way we fight the devil. And he prayed the rosary dozens and dozens of times a day. He's like, okay, here's the deal. If you look at his life and his time span, he spends like 16 hours in the confessional. Mass would take him 2 or 3 hours because he would get so emotional. Then somewhere in between there, he's supposed to like eat and breathe. And then he writes letters for hours. And then the couple hours he gets to sleep, because there's only 24 hours in a day, he would have fist fights with the devil. The devil would literally like pull him out of bed at times and things. Like, I want the tenacity and the work ethic like Padre Pio. I don't think I'm strong enough for that, but like this boy knew how to hustle and bustle. Just insane. And another thing, like he's that guy where it's like, and another one, and another one, and another one. Apparently he had the power of supernatural fragrance. I wish I never had to buy a perfume bottle ever again and I just had this. But people said that when they were around him, they could smell roses or jasmine or like the smell of incense, or like even if they were praying for his intercession, like Padre Pio, please help me, they would all of a sudden smell these roses that like, yeah, he had this like awesome scent about him. And that's not like something notoriously associated with like friars. Not saying like friars are smelly, but them like smelling like roses is not normally a thing. But yeah, he eventually was given back public life after that time, and he was able to live out his days, glorifying God, serving others, and being a holy example to his brother friars. And so he died at the old age of 81. It was due to poor health. It didn't have anything to do with like a specific illness or ailment or anything like that. But one miracle is after his death, his stigmata vanished. Okay, so those wounds he had for 50 years completely vanished. And it's not like, oh, they closed up, like no blood is flowing, like no scar, no scab. Skin was completely smooth as if it had never been there before. Even after, medical examination cannot even pinpoint like how this is happening, what caused this. There was no detection. Like, it just vanished when he died. And oh my gosh, I just think that is so wild. And another thing too is in his cell, they were going through his belongings and things. I mean, he has tons of letters and stuff, but they were looking at his habit. And under his habit, he has kind of like a nightshirt or a nightgown. And there's like blood stains, which people are like, well, no, duh. Like, if you have bleeding from your palms all the time, like, you're going to get a blood stain here or there. But one that they didn't think of or recognize was there was this huge, like, it almost looked like, okay, you know how you've done your laundry and there's like remnants of a stain that's still there and it just never totally cleans off. Like, even with OxyClean, it doesn't clean off. It looked like that, but there was just like this huge stain on his shoulder. And everybody's like, what? They didn't understand it because, like, you would think, like, oh, it's on the sleeves or it's on his hem, like, his hands, his feet. But this huge stain on his shoulder. And when asked about his pain tolerance with the stigmata, he, like, yeah, it did hurt. And he felt like this ongoing pain for 50 years. But he always said that the true soreness and pain was his shoulder. And if we think about the wounds of Christ, the worst part of his crucifixion and the greatest like pain caused, yes, the nails are not pleasant. Yes, the piercing on the side was rough, but it's carrying that cross up that trek to Calvary. That was probably the deepest wound and the biggest pain, is that shoulder. And so even having that revelation and also knowing like Padre Pio didn't like point that out or like highlight that in his wounds or in his struggle or in his suffering. He never complained. Like, man, I wish I had this guy's tenacity. He never complained. I just love this man. We call him a mystic when you have like a lot of spiritual encounters throughout your life. But this guy is a phenomenon and just like this Catholic MVP and this wonderful saint. But I would love to tell you my journey into getting to know Padre Pio and our friendship. So once upon a time, Lexi grew up seeing this cute little monk picture everywhere, but not really getting it. I was like, okay, maybe he like wrote a really cute prayer once. Like, I didn't understand all these beautiful and amazing miracles I just went through with you. So I had an opportunity to go on a pilgrimage. And so we actually make a stop at San Giovanni Rotondo. And I'm kind of like, whoopla, like, okay. And I heard he had the stigmata. I'm like, that's pretty cool. But we spent a couple days at his shrine. And we got to see his sweet little bedroom. I sat and prayed in the choir loft where he received the stigmata. We were able to have a private audience and say mass where he notoriously said mass. Crowds were even like up in the sanctuary in the altar just to fill in, where he was, holding the Eucharist as blood was going and dripping down his hands. We got to see his confessional that he sat in for hours and hours and hours. I got to see his habit. I got to see his gloves. I got to see, there's this room that's just like bookshelf walls with tiny little shelves. And it's just rows of the letters he got back and forth, and he kept them all. So I just got to see all these, like, it's just like a little piece of history, but I just got to all see these artifacts of Padre Pio. And I even got to see him, his body is intact. And so you're able to pray over it too. And so I literally got to be in the same room as Padre Pio. And it was just wild. But looking on it now, I was so naive and stupid that I don't think I did my homework enough to truly appreciate him while I was with him there. Okay? And I remember at one point I was annoyed and angsty, and I wandered off on my own. And as I'm wandering off on my own, I didn't want to do what the other group was doing. And I go into this room, and there's just these rows and lines of people standing around. And I'm like, I don't know what I'm in. And it's the confession line. There's just tons and tons and tons and tons of people in these confession lines. And I know I'm not I accepted defeat, maybe probably too soon, but there's no way in this 20-minute break we have that I'm going to get confession. So I don't even try to get in the lines, which is just me being stupid. But I just sit there and I start praying because I'm like, I don't know what to do. And never before, usually when I pray, it's just me and God talking back and forth if he wants to talk to me. Sometimes he's like, girl, you need to sit down and think through your decisions and what you're saying. But this was the first time I felt like Padre Pio was talking to me. And I had a lot of anger and frustration and some resentment built up about things. I don't even know what it was. It was so stupid. But Padre Pio was really pushing me towards forgiveness. And he was really, really, really pushing me that I needed confession. And so I kind of did my own little examination of conscience there. I later did confession on the trip, but it was the first time I ever felt a nudge from a saint before. It was just weird. It was kind of cool. One of the last days, we were traveling with a priest and his brother and his children, and he had a cute little baby in a stroller. And so in the museum, places where there were stairs, obviously you can't do with a stroller, and so we would have to take the elevator. Oh no, which who doesn't love an elevator? And so as we were in the elevator, as the doors were closing, a little friar comes in. And I mean, it's their turf, it's their home, so no duh. But he's just smiling, and we're all standing there, and we're like, what the heck? It's elevator music's in the background, do-do-do-do-do-do-do. And we're all just standing there okay. And he says something in Italian to the mother of the baby, and he basically says, can I give your baby a blessing? The mom's like, oh, that's cute. She's like, yeah, of course. And so we're like, aw, friar blessing. And as he does this, we're thinking he's going to put his hand on the baby or he's going to do the sign of the cross. And instead he reaches in his habit and pulls out this Ziploc. And in this Ziploc, there's this cloth. And he takes out the cloth and it's a glove with no fingers. And there's kind of this white, weird, used stain in the middle of it. And he places it on the baby's head and says this blessing. And so our friend, our priest, was brave enough to be like, can you bless us? So we're all kneeling in an elevator and we are getting blessed by this Franciscan who blessed us with Padre Pio's glove. It was placed on my forehead and he said the blessing on it. And I kept joking. I'm like, I'm a relic, which a relic is, there's different classes of relic, but it's a belonging or something that belonged to a saint. So it's considered a holy object because they lived a holy life. And there's different classes or degrees of a relic. And there's a third class relic, which means that something was in contact with one of their personal items. So I was walking around saying that I was a relic, which is definitely against church doctrine and not allowed, but it's an ongoing joke. But it was just such a cool encounter. And then the next day we saw that Franciscan again, and he's like, hello. Imagine that's your job, is you just get to surprise people in the best way while in this holy place. And so we got a picture with him. So cute. So I go home back to America, la-di-la-la-la. And I was like, oh, Padre Pio is cool. I didn't even realize how amazing he was. But I grew closer to some friends who were practicing the faith. And New Year's Eve rolled around, and they have this New Year's Eve tradition of picking a saint. And so I didn't know what to do, but then I thought back and I was like, let's think about how this year's going to go. This year I have to student teach. I was in college. This year I need to find a job. Who's a patron saint of middle schoolers or stress? And I Googled it and one of his names popped up. I was like, well, that's cute. I mean, Padre Pio is the patron saint of stress. So we all know that I need help in that department. So maybe I'll pick him. And I also thought it was kind of cool. I got to see where he lived and do all these amazing things. But anyways, when I Googled Padre Pio, or when I Googled patron saints of stress and middle schoolers and teens and Padre Pio came up, I just felt like this little nudge of maybe I should learn more about this dude. Maybe he can help me out. Maybe he can, watch out for, my life and this year I'm about to have with a lot of big changes. And I had like these really cool encounters of all the holy places I went to on that pilgrimage. Like Padre Pio really stuck out to me and it didn't really make sense why. And I'm like, maybe he wants to be besties with me. Like, I don't know. And so I spent that year learning more about him, praying, focusing on like his charisms, his desires, the things he was really good at. And my student teaching went amazing, like stupid amazing. And I was really nervous about it, but I had just the best experience ever. And I loved those kids and I felt called to teach. I'm like, this is like what I'm supposed to do. This is great. And then came the hard part, finding a job. And in my diocese, there were not a lot of openings that fit what I wanted to do. There was one position in the whole diocese that was exactly what I wanted: religion and history. And I heard a lot of good things, but I heard it was like going to be tough competition. I probably wasn't going to get it. So before I interviewed, I went over to the church and I prayed and I was like, Lord Jesus, I feel like I should be at this school. Help me out. Padre Pio, you've been a homie. Help me out too. Amen. So I do this interview. It goes really well. And I get it. Woo-hoo! So thank you, Padre Pio, for my job, right? When I come back and I sign my contract and I get a tour. And I get a tour of my future classroom. And so as I open the door to show me my classroom, I see this huge picture of Padre Pio. Like, it doesn't make sense. And it's not like a normal thing you see in Catholic schools, like this giant portrait of Padre Pio. And I just like get goosebumps. I'm like, what are you doing here? And later on, I learned that a junior high tradition we have is kind of like Harry Potter with houses. In my school, we have abbeys, like little houses, and we have a patron saint for each one. And the abbey that I am in charge of is Padre Pio's. That's the one assigned to this room. Like, that's going to be yours. They did not know my history. They did not know my bestie, my relationship with him, none of it. And I was just like, what a homie. Like, God bless Padre Pio. And thank you, Padre Pio, for helping me out. I mean, it was just such a God moment. And it was so cool. And it's also really cool to like reflect back on like our journey together and our friendship together, that I had that nudge in his hometown with him. And then God used this relationship to help me find my vocation in teaching. And ever since then, every year I pick a new patron saint for my year and I learn more about them and we grow in friendship together. But he just feels like a sweet grandpa uncle with like some crazy awesome abilities. I also feel like he's one of those that like, he's a saint that loves to tough love, but he does it in such a good way. Like when I tough love, sometimes the delivery is like kind of aggressive and they're like, Lexi, that was rude. And I'm like, wow, I'm so sorry. I need to go to confession. That wasn't Christ-like. But with Padre Pio, it just feels like these gentle, strong nudges towards Jesus. And it is really cool to hear about the miracles about him, but his humility and all of that, and also the way he would direct others to Jesus was profound. I mean, non-Catholics, non-believers, people who, were hurt by the church or didn't feel close to God at all, were coming back because of Padre Pio. And I just am so inspired by his work, and I want to do that in my everyday encounters, in my everyday callings. And some of the best quotes from Padre Pio, his famous one is, pray, hope, and don't worry. Keep it short, sweet, and simple, baby. And I have to remind myself that a lot because I'm a worrywart. But my favorite one, and it's just so beautiful and kind of like a prayer that I want to leave you with, is my past, O Lord, to your mercy, my present, to your love, my future, to your providence. And I just love that for this podcast and what we're trying to do here of ponder the purpose, embrace the journey, live the conversion of my past, O Lord, your mercy. God, I'm not perfect. You know this better than anybody. Please forgive me for my wrongdoings and the things I've done. Please be merciful to me and my mistakes. And then the second part, my present to your love. I want every day and every moment and every choice to be Christ-centered. I want your love to be profound and loud, and I want you to be the focus, and I just want to be loving you through all my choices and all my decisions and in whatever way you see fit. And then my future to your providence. I don't know where life's taken me. I have no idea, but I'm going to hope in you, and I'm going to trust in you that you will take care of it and your will is going to be done through me because you're going to stay close to me through this entire journey. He's amazing. Padre Pio's great. If you're not sure about him, just like do some homework, do some research, study up on this guy, because the best way we learn is through example and through experience. And it's so fun to see this saint that we have pictures of and footage of, and medical doctors have records of these things that have occurred, and just to have that trust in God like he did, but also to see the wonders that God can do when you give his life to him, or just the wonders that God can do when you give your life to him, gives me so much joy and hope in what can come of it. And also just, you can have friendship with the saints. Padre's my homie, and we go way back, and I love every year I get to be in his abbey and tell the kids about how amazing Padre Pio is and create more in the fan club. But it's through those holy examples that inspire us to keep trucking, even in the confusion and the suffering and the hardships of our lives. And also just to continue to embrace whatever journey God calls us. Because I highly doubt Padre Pio thought this was what his life was going to be when at 15 he wanted to join a religious order. But he worked so well with God's plan that he was able to be a part of so much wonder because of his yes. And so I hope that I got you a little curious on the saints, especially my man Padre Pio. Look him up. He's amazing. But I want to leave you with this. I hope you never forget to ponder the purpose, embrace the journey, and live the conversion. Thank you.